Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. And maybe those who are accustomed to French language, Edouard is, I think, should be written otherwise. Thank you. Dear friend Mark Donfried, director and founder of Institute of Cultural Diplomacy, dear participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to take part in this symposium on cultural diplomacy in Africa. And allow me to use this opportunity to sincerely thank everybody here. And I would like to also to apologize for the inconveniences, because it has not been very easy for me to find this time, because I was a bit, my schedule was not so kind. But thank God, we will make it today. Well, I was asked to make a presentation on this topic, the role of cultural diplomacy in strengthening the German-Burundi relations. And I wouldn't talk like an expert, but I will try to do my best. And I think you are expecting me to go beyond the theories. As a practitioner, maybe I would lose myself going through details about the theories. But anyway, the question I was asking myself was to know how relevant cultural diplomacy may be today for Burundi and Germany. I mean, to strengthen this historical ties between the two countries. First and foremost, I would say that cultural diplomacy, its importance stems from its ability to, its nature of being a tool of foreign policy. In this perspective, one understands easily that cultural diplomacy can help to promote a country's interest, just like classical diplomacy does. Well, I just wanted to go through, to try a definition of this concept, because sometimes we may take it for granted, but when you go deeply into it, there are some problems. So I just attempted to go through these problems and see if the definition which is agreed upon is really, according to me, fits well in what I'm trying to do and say. So, like many other concepts, defining cultural diplomacy is not a very easy task. And this difficulty stems from the fact that one of the components, that is culture, is sometimes confused or, interchangeably used with the word civilization. And this component makes it hard to be well understood, because it carries in itself it is sometimes associated with the recent history of colonialism. And this makes it the task not very easy. If we take, for example, one of the prominent academicians like Samuel Huntington, in his book on Clash of Civilization, and someone like Tyler, in his book Primitive Culture, they interchangeably use the word culture and civilization, and this makes it a bit confusing to some people. So in his book, Samuel Huntington argues that the fundamental source of conflict in this new world would not be primarily ideological or primarily economic. The great division among humankind and the dominating source of conflict will be cultural. So this is why the next step, he was to publish a book that he entitled Culture Matters. Indeed, culture matters. And what he says again, he continued to say, the conflict would arise the day the peoples and governments of non-Western civilization will no longer want to remain the objects of history of Western colonialism as the targets of Western colonialism, but to join the West as movers and shapers of history. Well, you understand here that civilization and culture are almost seen in the same sense. And for Samuel Huntington, civilization is a cultural entity. Well, the definition goes on, but from here I noticed that there was already a problem. The same thing with Tyler in his book, Primitive Culture. He also refers to elements like religion, morals, language, etc., to define culture. So I went again, I moved forward to other writers like George Hardy and Arthur Gillott, who give a restricted definition of culture. They make a clear cut between those who have the civilization and those people who are totally deprived of any civilization. And from this perspective, one is tempted to say that cultural diplomacy would be a matter of countries or groupings that have civilization, what some people said, decent nations. Responding to a question why nations engage in cultural diplomacy, a former German MP simply responded. He's called Walter Pickard. Why? Because it is what decent nations do. So here, you understand there are decent nations, there are those who are not civilized, who are not. So I'm going to these details just to show how the definition of the concept may carry a problem in itself, and we need to sort out this problem in order to be able to understand it fully. So this brought me to another concept, which is otherness, or it's also called alterity. So this notion also seems very important to me in the framework of cultural diplomacy. Because for cultural diplomacy to take place, there must be an acceptance of the other and all what he represents. That is his culture, his beliefs, his way of life, etc. So this means that the other, that's the opposite, meaning the one who is different from me or from myself, is not a blank screen upon which I can project my senses and definitions, upon which I can frame his identity and impose it on him. So this would be the result of this effort to impose an identity on someone else would surely result in two stereotypes and prejudice, which can easily lead to exclusion of the other. In this sense, the other is, therefore, he needs to be given an identity, to be liberated from himself, as you can see it, you can perceive it through one great writer, Frantz Fanon, in his book, Les Damnés de la Terre. So, in this light, the other has to follow the norms set forth for him to look like me, with the risk of becoming like these a mimic man of V.S. Naipaul, this great Indian writer, the mimic man in what he called the Isabella Island. So, I would say that all in all, cultural diplomacy, in order for it to bear fruits, there must be a mutual respect and exchange. One has to learn from the other, and one has to accept to bring his values so that they can be put together. There may be exchanges and a kind of putting together of those different values. You need to recognize the other as, of course, someone different, but who has also things and values which are worth receiving and giving. So, bearing in mind the previous developments, I would therefore join those who define cultural diplomacy as an exchange of ideas, values, traditions, culture, beliefs, and ways of life, with the objective of promoting relationships, sociocultural cooperation, and national interest. So this definition sheds light on another very important aspect of culture. That is the ability to convince and rally. In this light, cultural diplomacy can stimulate peace where there may be a diplomatic misunderstanding or any other unpalatable interests. So it's therefore worth noting that cultural diplomacy nowadays has become complementary to the classic diplomacy in achieving noble objectives like justice, like global peace, right, like recognition and respect. So this, of course, makes it very instrumental to the world because it contributes to stability, and this explains why cultural diplomacy is still has its relevance today, given what we observe around the world in terms of conflict. Let me now come to the main topic. Maybe I've been far away from it. Let me now talk about the strengthening Burundi-Germany relationships through cultural diplomacy. Well, when I was dealing with this topic, I was a bit confused. I was a bit disturbed because I was not very sure to find enough elements to demonstrate. I mean, to showcase all these ties, which would really be seen as part of cultural diplomacy in our relations with Germany. But given the historically deep-rooted ties between Burundi and Germany, one equally expects to find such strong ties in terms of culture. The question is therefore to know whether there has been any kind of cultural collaboration or interaction between individuals, institutions, communities on both sides in terms of cultural encounters or exchanges. In other words, do we find any cultural elements from German art, sports, literature, music, or language, or German influence in Burundi culture, or vice versa? Well, I will probably deceive you when I will say that there has been very little cultural exchange between Burundi and Germany, regardless the fact that Burundi was a former German colony before the World War I. No German influence can be felt in Burundi except some few German words that still exist in the local language. The same question would be, how many Kirundi words one can find in the German language? Well, I don't speak German language, and I would like those who know it, maybe if they find any word of Kirundi origin, to inform me. That would be of great help. Equally, in terms of infrastructures or historic monuments, a little influence from German culture or the ways of life can be noticed in Burundi. And from this, I tried to figure out what may be the reasons of this situation. And I came up with some elements. And the first reason was the context of colonization, in which the encounter between the two cultures and people took place. As you know it, during the colonization, little consideration was given to the colonized peoples, people's culture and values. In Burundi, for example, just to mention one example, Burundians were very religious people. They have their own gods. But when the colonizer came, they were compelled to abandon their own gods, which was called the Kiranga, to be Christianized and become, most of them, Catholics and Protestants. So there was therefore no room for mutual appreciation, given that the civilizing mission of colonialism aimed to totally uproot the colonized. The second reason is related to the context of World War that compelled Germans to leave Burundi early. The third reason is also linked to the second one, because after the German defeat and capitulation, the priority has been given to restoring German unity, to economic reconstruction and rebuilding of new German image and reputation, strongly affected by the Nazi regime. It is therefore obvious that the German people rather made efforts to look like those who liberated them, their country, rather than trying to build cultural bridges with Africa in general and with Burundi in particular. The other reason is linked with the negative portrayal of African countries by Western media and Western audience. In fact, this is not new. Many Westerners have a very limited knowledge of Africa. For many, Africa is still that heart of darkness described by Joseph Conrad in his book. Many Westerners know how an African dies, but ignore everything on how he lives. And this does not help a lot in building cultural bridges between the two worlds. Interestingly enough, those who venture to visit Africa are very impressed by the cultural diversity and richness of Africa. This gives hope, of course, that some days the stereotypes will disappear, and we need to build the future on this. On the side of Burundi, the weak presence of cultural elements on the international level may also be explained by historical reasons, structural reasons, and reasons linked to finance and human resources problems. As many of you probably know it, since Burundi got its independence, we experienced moments of hardships and upheavals, which finally led to ethnic cleansing and other problems. In terms of structure, the use of cultural diplomacy as part of foreign policy has not yet been fully implemented in Burundi. Even if there are some efforts, we still have these problems in terms of agencies, in terms of institutions that would help to propagate the cultural heritage of Burundi. We don't have things like Goethe Institute in Burundi, or Institut Français, or American cultural centers, or American corners, as we usually see them in different countries. So this problem of institutions is still there, and what is being done now is to try to see how one can find a solution to this problem. To this, we have to add the fact that we don't have a vibrant and active civil society and private sector dedicated to, ready to help in shaping this kind of cultural diplomacy. The lack of human resources and financial resources is also another issue which prevents the government to embark on this cultural diplomacy. Even if there are some who do not want to see governments' involvement in the field of cultural diplomacy, its role, at least when we take the case of Burundi, the role of the state remains crucial. It has a great role in channeling the transaction of tourism, trade, the student exchange, migrations, the circulation of books and information, cultural, sports delegations. For them to be really useful, they need to be channeled so that they can help to serve the national interest. Of course, when you want to implement this kind of policy, this kind of cultural diplomacy, you need qualified people, you need qualified human resources, and of course, financial means are still not there for Burundi to fully take advantage of this new field. Well, I wouldn't like to discourage you, but we still have hope, as I said. And now I would like to tell you about what is being done for Burundi to beneficiate fully from this important tool of foreign policy. So, the first step for Burundi was to raise awareness of the public on the importance of cultural diplomacy in strengthening relations with the outside world and enhancing Burundi's image and reputation abroad. Given the fact that the new developments in telecommunications, we are able to have access to different sources of information to get to interact with the outside world, and this helps Burundi and Burundi authorities to market Burundi, to market what Burundi has to present to the world in terms of culture, in terms of values, in terms of economic opportunities. And of course, we do have a lot of activities going on in terms of on the level of different ministries, like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I serve, from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Tourism, from the Ministry of Education, and from private sectors. That means that there are a lot of things taking place. And if I say, for example, on the Ministry of External Relations, let me say for Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's easier for some people. We have been given instructions that all the embassies abroad should organize regularly cultural activities, cultural events, to make the public aware of the cultural diversity we do have in Burundi. This is why last year, in June, we organized a 2-day event on social events, and the diaspora of Burundi and Friends of Burundi were very much interested. And we are also expecting to organize another one, what we call Burundi Day, Burundi Tag, in at the end of this month in Zolingen. And anyone who can make it, please do come. I think you will not be deceived. You will not be disappointed. So another strategy we are using at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is to promote decentralized cooperation in order to increase exchanges between Burundi and Germany. We noticed that there is a need to move beyond state-to-state cooperation in order to allow private individuals and organizations on both sides to interact directly. It is in this way that contacts and twinning projects have been initiated between sports academies, museums, universities, enterprises, churches, and communes, with a long-term objective of strengthening the relations with Germany on a broader level. Of course, don't misunderstand me. The state-to-state cooperation, bilateral relations are still stronger and stronger, and we don't have anything to complain about. We noticed that from the historical aspects, as from what I said before, taking into account the hard times we lived in Burundi because of war, we noticed that we have a lot of Burundians living abroad. And we want to capitalize on this presence of Burundians abroad to make Burundi well known and to make cultural values of Burundi well known abroad. As you know, anywhere a Burundian lives, he has with him an element of culture which one can emphasize on to make Burundi well known. Of course, at the level of the ministry too, we consider, we organize activities with the diaspora, and I would tell you that the Burundi diaspora has been promoted at the level of the 18th province of Burundi. This was it should be last week or some days ago, because there was a very big gathering of the Burundi diaspora in Bujumbura from the 28th to the 30th of June. So, at the level of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, there have been a lot of activities going on. Some of you who took part to the ITB exhibitions, they were able to enjoy Burundian drums and Burundian culture. A lot of things are being done in terms of tourism, and we are happy to see that many other people visit Burundi regularly, and they come back with positive insights. And this helps us it makes our work easier, because we don't need to go on convincing people, because there is a tendency for some people to believe what they see or to believe what they hear from his compatriot. So maybe I think I still have 1 or 2 minutes. Let me say that there is also another issue on which we emphasize. That is the collaboration with foreign civil societies and media. As you know, the role of the media can both contribute to shaping a positive or negative image. And we take this seriously to work with the media, international newspapers, or advertisement societies to make Burundi known on the international level. The respect of some internationally shared values raises the level of sympathy and encourages foreigners to visit the country and share knowledge. And most of the time, it is the diaries of those foreigners who visit Burundi, which sometimes you find the newspapers on international levels. And once there is a positive reaction or appreciation of Burundians, or Burundian hospitality, or beauties of the landscape, the good cuisine, or everything, anyone who reads all those kind of diaries will have the desire to visit Burundi and see for himself. So, given the time which is allocated to me, I would simply stop here, thanking you again for your attention. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Ibrahim Farah Hassan, and I live in Norway, but originally from Somalia. And so in Burundi, a deep corruption crisis is still in Burundi. The president of Burundi took the lead to fight against the corruption to improve Burundi. So what is missed also is, as you said, lack financial resources. So my question is, there is a troop based in Baydhabo in Somalia, which is Umbrella Amisom. My question is, where did Burundi government get this money to feed their troops? As you said, there is a lack of financial, and we have a problem, and we have a crisis. But what is the reason still Burundi makes corruption? Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. I would say that corruption in Burundi, frankly speaking, what you can find in Burundi, you can find it somewhere else, in Africa or even in Europe. You can even find worse. But it's not something that can be encouraged. And there are efforts which are being made in this section. And relating to our topic, the cultural diplomacy, domestic concerns can easily swamp the efforts of a nation to project itself on international level. So you need to make sure these things like corruption, like human rights or any other small problems are dealt with in a responsible way in order for other sectors maybe to deploy easily. Talking of the lack of financial means, I was just referring to the particular sector of cultural diplomacy, which is also linked to the lack of structural, because as I said, it's not really implemented as a tool of foreign policy, Burundi foreign policy. It was in this light that I talk of lack of means. Well, to come back to your question, for AMISOM in Somalia, Burundi went there not on his own but responded to an international call. You know that better than me because of the piracy in the Indian Ocean or other problems Somalia is facing now. So Burundi responded positively to a call of the international community to help restore peace and stability in your country. So it is on a African Union and UN mission. So some of the means, financial means, and some of the resources are also gathered by the international community. So it's not a question of Burundi financing everything. Thank you.